What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. Me and Christian are back. This is not a this or that. What this is going to be is our most overrated Devy players. So we're just looking at a quick synopsis of 4 guys that we feel like maybe you're getting a little bit overrated out there in Devy drafts, Devy leagues, and maybe where you can pivot. We're going to be diving into our combined dynasty rankings here that we have on the Patreon. So essentially, we look at every position and we combine it with NFL guys. So we're going to be looking at their combined rankings and to help you get value. If you want a more in-depth look at that, go join our Patreon because we have every position ranked up to 200 players per position. It's pretty in-depth. But we're going to be going into 4 guys who you might want to pivot off of if you want to get that value back. All right, let's dive in here. I had to put an Ohio State guy in the overrated thumbnail just to piss off Jeff Bell, but let's get into kind of what we got. I told Christian, give me 3 guys or 2 guys that you like. I'm going to throw 2 guys out there for overrated. We kind of came up with the same one here with Braylon. Right now, his consensus overall ranking is at 23 overall combined, which is very hard to do, by the way. You're going to be combining Devy and NFL guys, definitely going to be evaluations across the board. But why do we think Braylon may be a little bit overrated right now?
So I think the main thing to remember is that when he came to Wisconsin, he was a 17-year-old, and that's all anyone ever talked about. And he was incredibly productive as a 17-year-old kid. And I think the struggle with Devy is that sometimes that first year of film is what everyone latches on to. And so when you flip on the sophomore year film, there's a lot going against him. I think for a back his big, 6'2", 235, the contact balance wasn't really there. The explosiveness to hit holes really wasn't there. The vision was kind of questionable. He did answer some of the questions that I had about him, but more questions than were introduced on the sophomore film. And so what I'd love to see is, combine some of the freshman and sophomore film. Freshman year, he wasn't really a good pass catcher. I think his 2022 film, he showed signs of, being able to be more than just a dump off type of guy. There's a popular one-handed catch that's out there where he snags it with just a one hand across the middle and then makes something happen after the catch. That stuff's good. That is good stuff. However, the film, I would argue that his sophomore year film was day 3 back worthy. And when you look at where he goes in Devy drafts and how he's kind of viewed among the Devy community, that's just too much for me.
Yeah, I think this is all about value. Like, so I'm in a draft right now. He went at the 110, running back 5. So he was kind of in that area. There are a lot of guys out there that believe Brandon Allen's the running back 1 of this class, which I think an evaluation I don't agree with, but some will. So if you can maybe find that manager in your league that does believe that, I mean, you could extract a lot of value either from the NFL side or from, the Devy side. And we've been talking about Devy strategy a little bit in our Discord, and we were talking about it like the running back position, Chuba Hubbard, Zach Evans. These guys have been drafted. Sean Tucker, that late first area, have not really performed well in that evaluation period. So this is a good time to maybe pivot off of this class with those question marks. And I agree with you, his tape was not very good last year. I was going to be doing a 2024 video on him. I was diving into it, and he's got to definitely improve. But this is one of those weird pivot areas where you can pivot off of him, maybe collect more assets, or go get an NFL guy, which will help you win your side. Next kid that we have on here, Emeka Egbuka. And I'm interested to hear your take on this because I didn't have this one. He is definitely getting drafted pretty high. So in terms of consensus of where he's going, he went at the wide receiver 2 mark this last draft at 103. He went ahead Travion and Drake May in a draft that I was in. So his value is definitely at his ceiling. You see what he did in college last year. You see the analytic numbers are really, really good for Emeka. But I think I know where you're going with the evaluation part of it. He's at 23 in our combined rankings for wide receiver. What is your opinions on this one?
Yeah, so I think from a value perspective is where I wanted to attack this, because I think with the wide receiver position, we've seen a lot of fluctuation in pre-draft, heading into the 2023 draft. We had a lot of, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kayshon Boutte, and then everyone else. And then Kayshon Boutte might not even make the Patriots this year. I'm not saying that could happen with Emeka, but I am saying that there's definitely an opportunity for other receivers to step up and potentially be drafted ahead of him, be more productive than him. I think there's definitely a transition period at Ohio State, because when you look at Emeka and what he does well, I think he is very much so a good athlete, the best athlete on the field at any given time. And there's some, nuanced things. Route running, I think his routes can be a little sloppy. There's stuff with his release. I think, a lot of his snaps came from the slot. And so you don't see a lot of work against press and things like that. And I know Ohio State receivers, they're traditionally going to get drafted highly. And so when you consider where he's probably going to go next year, I do think that he has a chance to be a first round pick. But that is on the back of him actually improving on those different areas where I think if he doesn't improve, I think you're looking at more of like a top 50 to 75 pick. And then I'm asking myself, why did I draft him ahead of Drake May, who was a top 5 pick in Superflex and as a quarterback? So I think that's where it lands. I think, I prefer guys like Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy. Like those are guys that I prefer ahead of him. Even Evan Stewart, I think you have to wait, but I prefer those guys ahead of Emeka. And so from a value perspective, I'm kind of out on him right now.
Yeah, no, I agree too in terms of just where they're going, right? So Worthy went at the 201, Stewart 202. So you could realistically trade back a little bit, maybe collect some assets, and then go get a wide receiver that could get drafted ahead of him. Malik Neighbors has dropped down almost to the third round a little bit. It depends on the draft that you're in. And if there's an LSU fan in there, we know how that works. But he went at the 305 in a recent draft. So you're realistically like Neighbors could be ahead of him. And then you're talking about like, losing that value definitely on the back end of drafting him. I agree with all those points that you said. To me, after Caleb and Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm concerned about all these guys because I am just that's just kind of how Devy works. And so, yeah, the more you can collect the assets and move back, especially with a guy with him, like I really feel like you're drafting him at a ceiling here. And even then, like, what does that floor really look like? And I think that's the biggest question mark you have to ask yourself. Third guy that we have on this list, we're going to cause, I like this. We like to make people mad. Quinshon Judkins, 5'11", 220, obviously killed it last year at Ole Miss. SEC, 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns. Right now getting drafted anywhere from running back 1 in Devy to running back 3. He has not slipped out at any drafts I've been in. He's not slipped out of the top 3 in Devy drafts. So what are we thinking here with Judkins?
This one's tough, and we've had conversations about this very much so off of being recorded on video.
We're putting it out there now. We're putting
know.
this on out live now.
I know, and so I do want to highlight. I have him at RB11 right now, but that is a ranking to me that is scary. We all have him in that 11 to 12 range, and in our consensus combined rankings.
Yeah.
When you talk about what Quinshon Judkins does well, it's very much so the opposite of Travion Henderson, Nicholas Singleton, these freak athletes that you can bet on the athleticism, and at the running back position, athleticism is often king. I know Judkins, so there were flashes of Judkins being a really good athlete, but on a snap-to-snap basis, I do get concerned that he is very much so a product of that Ole Miss rushing attack where everyone succeeds, literally, and all of those running backs there were very good last year, including Zach Evans, who fell pretty far in the draft. I would like to see him, it's unfortunate because I think this Ole Miss rushing attack is going to continue to allow him to be productive. What I want to see is a little bit more athleticism on a snap-to-snap basis. I do think that he creates after contact a little bit, but at 220, I think that's a fake number too. There are things about Quinshon Judkins where I'm nervous that it's going to be like a 1-year wonder and he just starts to decline from here. I don't know. What do you think about Quinshon? This one's tough
this one's tough. Like, and I think we've talked about it off, and we were kind of mentioning all the things that you mentioned. So you bring up a good point there. He could have that Braylon Allen type trajectory. I think that offense, I don't know what that offense really is from a receiving standpoint. I think they're going to struggle there. If Jackson takes that next step, then yeah, that offense will kind of be humming along. You can't argue with the production. I just worry about his athleticism. Be honest with you. Like that is like the key for me when I'm looking at these guys and where he's going in drafts. It's there is a weird dead zone of that first round, from like 107 to like 106 or whatever the case may be to 110. When you're drafting these guys and you believe in them, Judkins is the type of guy that if I do draft, I'm probably not going to have my roster for very long because someone's going to really like Judkins and you can kind of ship him. He'll probably get you an elite asset. Like we said, we have him at that 10 to 12 mark in the combined rankings. And if you're looking at just where the running back position is right now in the NFL, like, Walker, ETN, maybe even Eckler, Chubb, if you want to maybe, tier up, maybe get Gibbs and some of these other guys, like depending on where those guys' values are, there's ways to kind of move Judkins. I'm with you though. I think that I just think every Devy player is overvalued, but especially running backs. I get really nervous in that territory. So yeah, absolutely there. And then I had to give one because I didn't want you to just get canceled on this show. I'm
Thank you.
gonna get canceled too. Rome Odunze, this please. I hope his dad doesn't see this because he's got a few burners out on the social media sphere. I like Rome. 4-year kid though, coming into Washington. I think that he did well last year, but if you see the numbers, like he did fine, but there's tons of production wise around the college football area where, you really like what they did too. Malik Neighbor stands in mind, some of those other guys there. And again, I like his size, 3'6", 201. He does that. I think with Rome is I'm very concerned with his athleticism. Like, and they've, a lot of scouts have talked about it. Playing speed is less than elite. Now you can go look, and I know that people have been yelling at people, about his metrics and all that. The fact is, we just don't know what they are right now, and I don't necessarily know. He can do this in college. Will that translate over to the NFL side? And I think that's where it is. Like, how does that athleticism trans over? And to me, like, I like Jalen McMillan on his team, on his roster a little bit better. So like, I'm not going to draft Rome where he's going. He's going like, some drafts early third when I can get like Jalen McMillan a little later, 4th or 5th round, who I think maybe projects better as an NFL wide receiver. And maybe we'll get a better draft grade and maybe draft capital. So that's where I'm at with Rome. I like him, but some are talking about him being like a top 3 receiver in this class. So if you can pivot off of that, I would pivot.
Do you remember Tyler Johnson?
I do. Our boy.
He reminds me of Tyler Johnson,
Okay.
and that, like, I think he's a good player, and I do think he's a good player, and I think that in the right situation he could be used on an NFL offense. I am not. I hear a lot of like Washington has 2 wide receiver ones and then a wide receiver 2. I'm not there. I agree. I think McMillan is the better asset right now. I think McMillan's athleticism, I think his versatility is a lot more translatable, I guess.
Yeah.
When I watched the 2 of them, I just, because I scouted them, I assumed that one or both of them would come out this year. And so I put grades on them and they were just like 3rd round grades. And so now I'm seeing like, oh, he could be a top 15, top 20 pick. I don't think that's in his range of outcomes at all. So, yeah, and from where we have him to where he goes in Devy drafts is a massive, massive discrepancy. And I think, I would lean on the side of I think we're closer. We're not always right, but I think that we are closer to what he will be at the NFL level.
Yeah, Raheem Jarrett just burning into my soul right now. That's really where this comes from. I will say, real quick, sleeper on Washington, Jalen Polk. He's a stud. I love Polk.
That's the wide receiver too.
Yeah, he's really good. And Polk's one of those guys that you're like, I could maybe get on him way late because he's going like 8th or 9th round if you're going that deep. That's a name to get, kind of keep your eye on. So we appreciate you guys. Whoa, I did not mean to blow us up that close, but we appreciate you guys here on the channel. Hope you enjoy this. Obviously, when we're other thing to talk about with overrated or underrated or whatever rankings, remember, this is all subjective. Every league is subjective to this. We're just trying to give you guys options here, like whether, and understanding pivoting and understanding trade markets and how that works in Devy. I am much more, comfortable trading for NFL assets. That's just kind of how I play. I don't like collecting Devy assets because we see a lot of misses. And if you're on social media, I kind of tweeted out some of those misses over the weekend, and you can go check out my page for those. But there definitely are. And in our Discord, we talk about it in our Patreon. So we appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys next time. See you later.